Hearing Officer. I'll be calling the July 13th meeting of the Staff Hearing Officer to order and start with preliminary matters. I don't believe we have any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items that I'm aware of. Any staff? Okay, so then I'll move on to item B, which is announcements and appeals. And I do have one item under this agenda matter for a project at 302 Coleman Avenue. This is a proposal for an accessory dwelling unit at 302 Coleman Avenue. And as I move to the next slide, with these types of accessory dwelling units in the coastal zone, why they do require coastal development permit and a decision by the staff hearing officer, they do not require public hearings. So typically, after I've read the staff report and been familiar with the site or have visited the site, I can make a decision today based on, it does receive public notice. We didn't receive any written public notice for this item. I have read the staff report and I am familiar with the site. And given the relatively small nature of the accessory dwelling unit and that it is truly accessory in this case, and understand that although it does not meet the objective architectural criteria in the municipal code, it will require some single-family design board review and action. So my action is limited strictly to the use of the ADU on the site, and I can support the findings as they were drafted by staff with the conditions of approval as proposed, recognizing that the accessory dwelling unit is not expected to affect coastal resources. It's within an existing developed neighborhood, as I mentioned, accessory to the main residence on the site. And with the conditions, our standard conditions, as well as the condition to replace the tree that's proposed to be removed on a 1-to-1 ratio, I can approve that coastal development permit. And so that concludes that announcement. Then I'll open general public comment. If there's comments from any members of the public pertaining to items that are within the purview of the staff hearing officer but are not on the agenda today, and I don't know if we have any folks online.
We did not receive any speaker slips and we do not have any remote public commenters.
Okay, then I'll close item C of preliminary matters and move on to the first item on the project portion of the agenda, which is 134 La Plata. And Ms. Plummer, if you'd like to do a presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Brooke. So the project site is located at 134 La Plata, which, as you can see on the screen, is a corner lot, and as such, subject to 2 front setbacks, the primary of which is La Plata, and the secondary front setback is off Calle Bravo. The overall project involves a new pool to be constructed in the area, which generally functions as the backyard for the residents, as well as associated pool equipment and an AC unit, which are located in the secondary 20-foot front setback. It's worth noting that this particular site, while it does have 2 front setbacks, the front setback is generally to provide a buffer between the public right-of-way and the residential development. And on this particular project site, this area where the new pool, as well as the equipment is proposed, is functioning as the backyard or rear yard of the residence, and is screened by an existing established hedge from Calle Bravo. Staff is supportive of the equipment located within the secondary front setback, primarily because the improvements that are being proposed are considered appropriate residential amenities that are considered appropriate for a backyard. And while not the primary reason for support, it is currently screened by an existing established hedge and is also not immediately adjacent to residential development on the other side of the front setback. All equipment is required to meet the city's noise threshold, so they cannot exceed 53 decibels. And since that's a standard requirement, it's not considered a condition of approval of the project. And that's really it. It's a pretty minor project, so if you have any questions, I'm here for that.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. I don't have any questions for staff. If the applicant wants to add any additional information, you may come up.
No, I don't have
Okay.
any questions.
Thank you. I think you covered it pretty well. This is pretty straightforward. Yeah, I don't have any questions, so I'll just move on to opening public comment. We didn't receive any written correspondence on this, and I don't know if anyone here wishes to speak on the matter, or if we have anyone online.
Thank you. We did not receive any speaker slips, and there are no remote public commenters in the webinar.
Okay, thanks. I did go to the site a couple days ago. I was able to walk around and see from the street the area where the pool and the pool equipment is proposed, and did notice the topographical change too from, I guess it's Calle Brevo down, down into that area, which I think also helps, at least from a visual standpoint, if the hedge were at some point not there, that it would provide a little bit of visual buffer too for anyone walking by along that street. And we recognize with these properties with two front setbacks, where a large part of that area functions as your backyard, it's challenging. And I appreciate in your letter, your discussion of other areas you considered for the equipment and potentially other areas would have impacted your neighbors. This is not anticipated to impact your neighbors, of course, assuming that it meets all the noise requirements. So I can approve the front setback modification largely with the findings in the staff report. I will modify the findings slightly to strike the last sentence regarding the fact that the lot is surrounded by hedges. So finding is simply based on the fact that that the mod is necessary to secure an appropriate and common improvement on the lot, the air conditioner unit and pool equipment for proposed in-ground pool at an existing single-family residence. The subject lot is subject to two front setbacks since it is a corner lot, and while the equipment is technically within the secondary front setback, functionally it is the rear yard of the residence, and the rear yard is an appropriate location for such equipment. So with that, your modification is approved with the condition as it's presented by staff in here about if you do potentially find any contaminated soil or any remnants of any abandoned oil wells in the area. With that, I do need to just let people know that my decisions are appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and also within that same period, the Planning Commission can decide on their own to call up any decisions of the staff hearing officer. If that happens, Ms. Plummer would let you know. Other than that, I thank you for your time, and your modification is approved. And then the second item on, you can. Thank you very much. I don't see Mr. Bauman yet. We might wait just a minute. Maybe we're progressing faster than folks thought. The case planner for the next item. So I'll just recess for a couple minutes and see if I can have Mr. Bauman will show up here. Call the meeting back to order after a very brief recess. And item 2B is 36 East Montecito Street. If Mr. Bauman would like to give a staff presentation,
All right.
please
Morning.
do.
Morning, Ms. Brooke. So this is a coastal development permit. It's the first CDP I've had by the staff hearing officer, interestingly, and the reason is it's in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. And the project involves the reuse of an existing commercial building that was previously used as a car rental business. The alterations would be exterior windows and doors and interior improvements, a new bar and seating, interior remodel of restrooms, etc. A new kitchen would be submitted under a separate building permit by the future tenant. I should go to the plan set. The project's in the lower state component area of the coastal land use plan south of Highway 101. It's an area that we refer to as the Funk Zone. It's a key visitor serving area. Major coastal issues in this area are sufficient on and off street parking for coastal access. That's the main concern pertaining to this project. I remember how to zoom in.
Touchscreen too, is it like a tablet?
Okay. I'm doing worse now. There's kind of a bird's eye aerial of the vicinity of the project. It's down here, and then there's a head straight-on aerial view of the site, the existing site. It was the Avis rental car site. So that's what it looks like now. The project would add a lot of landscaping. The square footage of landscaping increases dramatically, and very generous perimeter planters. The trees in the background behind the building would be removed, but additional trees would be replaced. New street trees all along here. These two existing driveway curb cuts on Montecito Street would be closed off to allow for more perimeter planting. Now let me go to the plans. That's the existing site plan. We just saw that with the photograph view. And then here's the proposed site plan. All the green area shows the new landscaping planters. The parking lot would be restriped. The parking lot design overall was, the attempt was to get as many parking spaces in there as possible. And then there's all this new patio seating area for outdoor seating. So the project proposes a shell building permit to prepare the building and site for a prospective food and or beverage service tenant like a coffee shop, beer tasting, wine tasting type of use. It includes well, like an example, maybe you could call it a placeholder, seating plan for indoor and outdoor seating that could be potentially changed by a future tenant. So the relevant, or the big coastal policies, I mean, we looked at all the coastal policies, but it really comes down to Coastal Act and city coastal land use plan policies regarding coastal access. And then that kind of comes down to parking. So basically we boil all this down and it becomes all about the parking, really, in terms of the findings to approve the project. The Coastal Act policy is regarding maintenance and enhancement of public access, and then kind of a parallel, very similar city policy regarding off-street parking for new development. We discussed that in the staff report and suggest the staff hearing officer should consider if the proposed parking will maintain and enhance public access to the coast by providing adequate on-site parking facilities based on the amount of seating area available relative to the amount of parking provided. The parking requirement for this project, it comes down to being a requirement of 1 parking space for 3 customer seats. So that's kind of the way the project was designed, to maximize the number of spaces so that they could have more allowable seating for customers. In this case, approving the proposed number of customer seats for the shell building permit is complicated because a future tenant may wish to reconfigure the indoor and/or outdoor seating areas. And those seating areas are pretty generous given the seating plan. You know, it would be possible to put a lot more seats in that outdoor area and some of the indoor space. So staff did have some concerns about that, and we've reviewed it at length and discussed it quite a bit with the applicant and came to this proposal. So staff believes, and we're kind of relying on the fact that this can be sufficiently addressed by conditions of approval and also a recorded covenant limiting uses to the seating capacity that can be met by the on-site parking. And having that as a recorded covenant would make prospective tenants aware of that seating limitation. So that's kind of how we got to supportability, is with those conditions, and those are shown as draft conditions I, B, 1, and 2 on the first page of the draft conditions of approval. The recorded conditions agreement for the approved development, and also the use limitations. The project was exempt from further environmental review as an existing facility, and also minor alterations in land use limitations. So staff believes with those conditions of approval that the findings can be made to approve the coastal development permit. So I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Baumann. I have a question, and it is related to how the condition of approval is worded for the approved development. And I appreciate very much so that we do need to document what's being discussed today so that future tenants understand and that the property owner understands the potential limitations on how many customer seats can be accommodated both indoor and outdoor, knowing that 13 parking spaces is likely as many as they can get, at least with this outdoor amenity configuration with the outdoor seating and the bocce ball. I do have a question though, because I do see reference in both the applicant letter and the plans mention of potential coffee bar. And that has a different parking ratio of 1 space per 100 square feet. But I do believe we'd still have to park the outdoor seating if there was any outdoor seating associated with the coffee bar. So with an 1,100 square foot building, potentially there could be 11 indoor seats for a coffee bar. And I'm not sure how many outdoor, very few outdoor, I suppose. And the reason I'm asking is I'm just cautioning against reference to coffee bar. I'm not sure that 13 parking spaces could support a coffee bar. So I'll get to this maybe in the deliberation, but the condition regarding the approved development might be too specific in terms of maximum of 39 customer seats, just in case a use is proposed in the future that has a different parking ratio. So just something to keep in mind, and maybe the applicant can speak to that a little bit too. about what tenant improvements might be done. Because I do understand that what's triggering the need for the coastal development permit is the change of use, but it is only a shell permit. So I'm trying to not take into too much consideration what that future tenant might be, but I also don't want to set false expectations for tenants and the property owner. So I guess I didn't really ask a question other than maybe confirming for me that with our coastal policies, we do have to park indoor and outdoor seating, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
so,
I didn't realize that the coffee was like a fast food parking
Right.
requirement versus a restaurant and the higher per seat. So I missed that.
it's okay, I don't think it was a miss. It's just mentioned as potential future tenants, so it's all sort of not clear what would occupy this space. And then I'll have the applicant, yeah, maybe address that. And then don't think I have other questions right now. Let me double check. My notes real quick on this one. It would return to ABR, and they had some comments on that, and I understand, in a question I had to you earlier in the week about the functionality of the parking spaces, that transportation planning is comfortable with the configuration, even if the existing ability to drive across the property line were removed at some point in the future.
Right. They said these parking spaces, just as they could back out in this direction, they can also back out in this direction, including this one. This one was the one they had to look at most carefully to make sure that car could back out and go
Okay.
out that way. And they don't have concerns or really standards for what happens if a parking lot is full.
Is full and
So
how
if
people
somebody
get.
drove around the corner here, they can't park. They would just have to do a multi-point turn or something.
Okay.
And transportation operations looked at it, and I think they were okay, even if somebody had to back out here. They didn't have a big concern about that. But they could probably do a multi-point turn and get turned around.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Baumann. If the applicant wants to come up and present any additional information or maybe address how this shell building might be improved with the tenant in the future, and understanding, of course, the limitations on seats given the 13 parking spaces.
Yes, of course, absolutely. Good morning. My name is Jared DeGancy. I'm with Anacapa Architecture, architect on behalf of this project. And I will jump to that plan just so we can start to talk about that. But I will get to your question, just reiterating some of the few items that Tony already mentioned is it's an adaptive reuse of an existing building, taking the empty vacant space along the gateway corridor of the 101 freeway and just trying to make best of the site and revitalize it, make it an attraction point in the funk zone. So not changing the building footprint. We are restriping the parking lot to meet all of City of Santa Barbara's parking standards, as they don't currently comply. And to address your question on if we get a coffee shop, for instance, for a fast food, get my mouse here. Our understanding and to address the idea of the 1 to 100 square foot is if we are using my understanding is that's a space that would be occupied for the actual restaurant space or coffee shop, so to speak. So we imagine, and again, knowing that we're limited by parking, the building owner is going to have to provide and write into the lease. If this is a restaurant, we have a 39 seat limit occupancy. If this is a coffee shop, we're limited to the 1 per 100 square foot. So it's something that's been frequently discussed because we knew that was from the start the challenge. And so those will be maintained and written into the lease by the owners. But what we were thinking is if this does become, for instance, a coffee shop, I was hoping I could draw on this, but maybe not. Let's try this guy. Unfortunately. Well, what we were thinking is how the square footage would count towards the 1 per 100 is, see that the square-like area basically between grid lines 1 and 2, that would be essentially like the functioning coffee shop space. And then, you know, we're still going to have the 2 bathrooms, and then there's going to be an office space, storage space. And so essentially the occupancies to the right of grid line 2 would be counted at like a 1 to 500. So what I'm getting at is we thought this space here, this is roughly 600 square feet, so 1 to 100, that'd be about 6 occupants. If this area here is going to be 1 to 500, that would add 1 more space because this is approximately 480 square feet. So that's about 7 occupants, and that would mean we would need to inform the tenant you need to limit your seating such that it's only going to provide an additional 600 square feet to get us to our 13 occupants total. And so this area that we're showing with the seating here is roughly 400. And then if you take this area up here, it's about 150. And so something like the bocce court or some sort of like site amenities still would need to exist to limit that area because we know we're limited to that 1 to 100 square feet.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. I am not sure that that's how the parking or the floor plan would be divided up by zoning staff and calculated for parking requirements. So I just caution your assumptions on splitting out just the customer area to 1 per 100 and then the back to something else. My understanding is that most of it would be parked at 1 per 100 because it does take into account employees as well. So it's just caution.
Understood.
That if it were to be something like a fast food use, it might be parked, the square footage might be counted differently. So I'd
Okay,
encourage
understood.
you to talk to zoning staff about that.
Yeah, and this is something that'll be upfront with each tenant that inquires, because really like the main part of this is to just kind of, we want to get through the longer timeline processes with the shell renovation like the CDP and change of use. This way it's more flexible for the owner to find a tenant, and the tenant doesn't have to kind of go through a much longer timeline permitting process. So, but yeah, all these items will need to be essentially trickled through to the lease agreement.
Okay, thanks. I don't think I have any other immediate questions, so I'll open public comment if we have anyone wishing to speak. I didn't receive any written correspondence on this item.
Thank you. We did not receive any speaker slips, and we do not have any remote public comments.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fennessy. So I'll close public comment. I first appreciate the adaptive reuse of the building. I can see the vision for this space, and then it would be a nice improvement. Just removing some of the asphalt and hardscape and replacing it with landscaping and usable space, and just reusing the building. Honestly, just not demolishing and building with new resources. As Mr. Bauman said, the primary coastal issue here is just ensuring that there's adequate parking. It is an area that can be fairly impacted with limited parking, given the non-conforming uses in the area, non-conforming parking, I should say, of the uses in the area. So it's one that we're pretty sensitive, concerned about. And my primary concern in just considering the change of use to something, we know it's something more intense than the previous car rental dealership, but don't know exactly what it is. I'm just wanting to make sure we're very transparent about what can potentially be, what can potentially occupy this building. If 13 parking spaces are approved ultimately by ABR through your work with them on the landscaping and all that, that it might be 39 seats. It might be less if it's fast food. And so that's why I'd probably want to modify that condition B1 slightly about what's being approved today. I'm supportive of the coastal development permit to change the use. We get in these situations fairly often where we're shown a floor plan where everything looks good at the moment. We don't know what the future tenant will be, and then it ends up being used in a much more intense fashion. So anywhere where it can be disclosed to the property owner and any future tenant what the expectations are, that's really better for everybody. So I can approve the coastal development permit with the findings as drafted by staff. Might want to ask for suggestions from Mr. Baumann if he has any about how to modify the condition regarding approved development to still make it clear that the coastal development permit is approving the change of use. I think I just want to strike the reference to a maximum of 39 customer seats, even though that is an important component to convey to a tenant. It's maybe making too much of an assumption about what the future use might be. So I'd say perhaps limited to a change of use to a food and or beverage service use, for example, restaurant, wine tasting, etc., of an approximately 1,140 square foot building, approximately 2,000 square feet of outdoor patio area, including bocce court, fire pit, landscaping planters, and a maximum number of customer seats based on parking provided. I'm not sure, it's just so general, but
Or, well, it might not be number of seats if it's fast food.
that's
So,
correct.
maximum parking demand or something like that? A parking demand not to exceed the parking provided, or not parking demand, parking requirement shall not exceed the parking provided, something like that.
Yeah, or perhaps just in ensuring that the use meets the parking requirement per the zoning ordinance, including both inside and outside seating areas. I don't know if that's
That
too
sounds pretty good.
general. Okay. Does that make sense, Ms. Fennessy? I was stopping in mid-sentence and so approximately 2,000 square feet of outdoor patio area, including bocce court, fire pit, landscaping planters, and a maximum number of seats to meet the parking required per the zoning ordinance. Is that confusing wording? Can you read that back to me? I just forgot whether I said number of seats in that.
What I have is you said maximum number of seats to meet parking required per the zoning ordinance.
Okay, so I don't want to use seats. Maybe,
Maybe a new sentence after where it says including bocce ball, fire pit, landscaping plan, and then a new sentence to refer to the limitation on the parking requirement that the use has to
okay.
not exceed the parking
Any
requirement.
future use must be able to, or any future use will be limited to customer occupancy based on the parking provided. Okay, let's go with that, including both inside and outside seating areas. I do want to leave that in there, and other improvements, and so the rest would stay the same. I don't think I had any other changes to conditions. Okay, and Mr. Baumann, did anything else come up for you after the applicant's discussion or questions?
No, I think with that rewording of the condition 1, it looks pretty good to me.
Okay, and then that following condition 2 does allow some flexibility, that if something were to change and a different type of tenant were wanting to move in here, that there is some flexibility to propose that through the community development director to find it in substantial conformance with the coastal development permit approved today. So with that change to condition B1, I can approve the coastal development permit, subject to all the other conditions and the findings as they were drafted by staff. I do need to note that my action today is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and also within that same period, the Planning Commission can decide to call up any decision I make today within the same period. If either of those things happen, Mr. Baumann would contact you and let you know about any next steps. So thank you for your time today. Thanks, Tony. Sorry about doing that on the fly. I just sort of realized this morning that this meeting is adjourned.